Hi, my name is Yen. Today we're going to be painting and upgrading my computer. We're going to add an additional 16 gigabytes of RAM, totaling to 32. I'm going to move my M.2 drive from my laptop into my desktop, along with swapping out the CPU and the GPU. Keep watching to find out which one I upgrade to. But first, we paint. Bend up these tabs so we can pop out the front mesh, along with the clear acrylic. Don't forget the screw in the middle, and removing that should make it really easy to just pop this out, along with this one. These are the panels I wish to paint. I'm gonna leave this part black because I like the idea of leaving a little bit of black, and also I don't think I have enough paint to paint everything. So it was intentional. Yes, we're gonna sand the panels. Ideally, I would have done a better job scratching off the original black, but I was lazy. It is what it is. This is self-etching primer. I heard it's good for metal. I think this can was kind of old, so there was this powder that I wasn't a huge fan of. I tried to get it off with sandpaper, but I don't think that really helped. I let the primer dry for about 2 days, and I moved on to the blue base coat. This is the base coat. I went on to the blue turquoise colored coat. I think I sprayed too thin of coats. Ideally, I would have done slightly heavier coats for a smoother finish, but it worked out in the end. This is a GTX 1080 and the additional 16 gigabytes of RAM. This is the motherboard. I would start by setting it on top of the motherboard box that it came in. Grab your CPU by the side. This is an i7-8700, and you want to align the golden triangle with the white triangle on the bottom left side of the socket. It should fall into place with no force whatsoever, and you can give it a little wiggle and gently set the cover back down. Hold your retention arm back down to where you found it. It might take a little force, so don't be scared, and this black cover is supposed to pop off. Do not throw it away. It's important if you need to send your motherboard back. Up next is the RAM. You want to undo the latches on these two sides. Some motherboards only have one. In this case, there's a cutout on the RAM and a notch on the motherboard. You want to make sure those line up. And once they're lined up, firmly push down on the ends of the RAM stick with your thumbs until you hear it. Don't be afraid. It might take a little bit more force than you're used to, but it won't break. Great. Now there's 32 gigabytes in. We're going to remove this plastic. Up next is the M.2 drive. Insert at a 45-degree angle. Don't forget to peel off the sticker for the heatsink, and then screw down the heatsink on top of the M.2 drive. So if you're like me and you have a SATA M.2 drive, be sure to put it on the bottom or else the motherboard won't detect it. And it's time for CPU cooler installation. Start by putting the back plate on, along with the standoffs. Every cooler is a little different, so do read the manual. Don't forget the thermal paste. Cooked piece of rice size is good enough. And I tightened it down on opposite sides, making sure to distribute pressure evenly along all four sides. Up next is the Wi-Fi card. Insert at a 45-degree angle and push down and screw it down with an M.2 screw. Now we can remove another bit of plastic. This one was a little bit of struggle. This is the case. It's a little gross and messy. Don't forget the I/O shield from the motherboard box. You want to push this in. There's not really a technique. Make sure it's not upside down and that the holes will line up once you put your motherboard in. Power supply, you need a couple of cables. You need the 8-pin CPU cable, the 24-pin ATX cable, the 6+2-pin GPU cable, and SATA cables if you have additional hard drives like me. If your power supply is modular, now would be a good time to plug things in because we're going to power it on. I used a screwdriver to short out the power button pins. I was very confused as to why the screen wasn't turning on, but then I realized the display was not set to the correct source. And after setting it to the correct source, ta-da! I made sure all 32 gigabytes of RAM were detected, along with the CPU. After that, I put the power supply in the case, and then I screwed the motherboard in, setting it into the I/O shield and then screwing it down. This is pizza, and it has onion, bell peppers, and chicken. Now is a good time to put the GPU in. Make sure the retention clip is pulled back and insert it into the slot. And don't forget to screw it in. 6+2-pin GPU cable. Make sure it's not the CPU one because they have the same number of pins. Screw in the fans where necessary. The paint actually takes a really long time to dry. You want to give it about a week before the smell kind of goes away. And before assembling everything, I gave everything one last wipe down with a paper towel. And to put it back together, we just do what we did, taking it apart, but in reverse. The paint is actually pretty durable. Same thing goes for the acrylic panel. You just want to be careful not to scratch it and make sure everything's aligned before you bend the pins back. I went really slowly with the pins as to not snap them, which would be difficult to fix. After giving it another wipe down, I screwed all the panels back in with the thumb screws, and I snapped the front panel back in, making sure all 4 sides were clicked in. And finally, the acrylic top panel. One last wipe down, making sure there's no more handprints. And finally, we can put it back into place. It's not turning on. Oh wait, the power supply is not turned on. Great, turn on the power supply and hit the power button. You know, I think this project turned out pretty alright. Could have done a better job sanding it. And the paint looks alright, from about an arm's reach distance, which is really what I strived for in the beginning. If I had to redo this project, I would definitely buy better primer. The paint will take about a week to dry. If you wait too short of a time, it'll smell really bad if you put it back in your room. And you really want to do a good job sanding the original black off of the case before you start painting. So once again, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, along with the little bell notification so that you get a little private message every time I upload. Bye!